The dense, churning forest of Deathworld buzzed with an eerie silence that unnerved even the toughest cadets. Ryder Thorne pressed herself against the ground, barely breathing as she scanned her surroundings. This was her fifth mission on the infamous planet, a lethal training ground known across the galaxy as Hell's Arena. Deathworld was the ultimate crucible. It wasn't just about physical endurance or combat skills, it tested a cadet's adaptability, intuition, and mental resilience. Here, the poisonous atmosphere could melt your lungs if you breathed too deep, and the ground itself was filled with traps and pitfalls that had claimed the lives of many cadets before her. Every tree, every rock seemed to watch, waiting for a moment of weakness. Sweat trickled down Ryder's neck as she checked her gear and moved forward cautiously, brushing aside a thorny branch. The days she had spent on Deathworld had worn her down, and the constant threat of danger was starting to fray her nerves. But Ryder had always been underestimated, always deemed adequate rather than exceptional. She was determined to prove herself. Here, in the heart of Hell's Arena, she would earn her place in the ranks, or die trying. A sudden pulse beneath her feet made her stop. She glanced at her scanner, noting a spike in energy levels far higher than anything Deathworld's chaotic ecosystems should produce. Her pulse quickened. "Thorne, do you copy?" The cold, impersonal voice crackled in her earpiece, and she reached up to touch it, her eyes never leaving the scanner. "We're detecting a substantial energy anomaly near your coordinates. Investigate and report immediately." Ryder's fingers hovered over her comm. "Roger that, moving in now." Curiosity and dread twisted in her gut as she pressed on, following the energy signal through increasingly dense foliage. The silence deepened, and she could feel an odd pressure in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then, the ground shifted beneath her, crumbling without warning. She tried to leap back, but her boots lost traction and she tumbled down a steep incline, sliding over rocks and dirt until she landed heavily on the cavern floor. Gasping, Ryder pushed herself up, the dim glow from her flashlight revealing an ancient, hidden chamber. Symbols were etched into the walls, faintly glowing and impossibly old. She had seen alien artifacts before during her studies, but this was different. The symbols seemed to pulse, resonating with the beating of her heart. Her gaze was drawn to a strange, sleek object embedded in the rock, black and metallic, yet alive with circuitry that glimmered like veins. Compelled beyond reason, Ryder reached out, fingertips brushing the cold metal. In an instant, her vision exploded with light, and a jolt of searing energy tore through her arm into her very core. She fell to her knees, gasping as her nerves burned. Images flooded her mind, images of alien soldiers, vast and powerful, fighting a monstrous enemy. The galaxy was bathed in flames, an endless war raging as worlds crumbled. The pain subsided, but the connection remained. The weapon had latched onto her wrist, the metal melded seamlessly with her skin, as if it had always been part of her. She felt it there, an ancient presence, simmering with power and a hunger for battle. Her comm crackled to life again, but this time, Ryder didn't answer. She wasn't alone anymore. The weapon had chosen her, and she could feel its need to fight, to unleash its full potential. Ryder wasn't just a cadet anymore. She was the wielder of something ancient, something dangerous. And whatever had created it wasn't gone. It was coming. News of Ryder's strange abilities spread like wildfire through the cadet ranks. Whispers filled the training grounds as cadets exchanged rumors, watching Ryder with a mixture of fascination and fear. Her movements had become quicker, sharper, like a dancer in battle. She was undefeated in sparring sessions, her reflexes almost superhuman. But Ryder herself felt the price of her power keenly, as though she were losing pieces of herself each time the weapon activated. The first time she had used it in combat training, the weapon had pulsed with excitement, as though it remembered every war it had ever fought. Her opponent had charged at her, and in a blur, she disarmed them in one move. Ryder had stood over them, her heart racing, realizing that the weapon had guided her hand, but the victory had come at a cost. That night, Ryder was plagued by visions. Towering alien warriors clad in shimmering armor, their voices a haunting melody of strength and sorrow. She could see their faces, could feel their memories seeping into her own. They were the Solum, an ancient species wiped out in a war against a race called the Vaelik. The Solum had forged the weapon in desperation, a final stand against extinction. These visions were both empowering and terrifying. Ryder was changing, her body and mind adapting to the weapon's alien essence. She could feel her own identity slipping, little by little, replaced by fragments of past wielders. She trained harder than ever, driven by a desire to master the weapon's power, but also to keep it from mastering her. It wasn't long before fleet officials noticed Ryder's skills. Officers began pulling her into classified briefings, interrogating her about the weapon, watching her with guarded suspicion. Her abilities were valuable, but the threat she posed was equally clear. Some wanted to harness her power, while others saw her as a ticking time bomb. Isolation weighed on her. Even those she had once called friends kept their distance, afraid of what she was becoming. The weapon's influence grew stronger, filling her mind with flashes of alien war tactics, strategies meant to counter enemies more advanced than any in the Terran fleet. She realized with growing horror that the Vaelik were not just an enemy of the past. They were back, and they were moving through the galaxy, conquering worlds without warning. Ryder's nightmares grew vivid. She saw Vaelik ships blotting out the skies, felt the fear and rage of the Solum as they faced extinction. The weapon was more than a relic. It was a beacon, calling to the Vaelik, marking her as both a target and a threat. The galaxy trembled as news spread of a new, unseen enemy. A colony had vanished overnight, entire cities reduced to ashes with no survivors. Intelligence reports were fragmentary, but one name kept surfacing in whispers: the Vaelik. As Ryder pieced together the reports, a cold dread settled over her. The Vaelik were here, and they wanted the weapon. During a strategy meeting, Ryder confronted the fleet's high command. This weapon is more than just an artifact. It's part of a defense against the Vaelik. They're back, and they're hunting it. The room fell silent as her superiors considered her words. Some saw the truth in her eyes, but others remained skeptical, wary of her power. Fear and distrust split the ranks, and Ryder found herself increasingly isolated, in step, treated as both a savior and a potential threat. With the fleet divided, Ryder knew she couldn't face the Vaelik alone. She sought out mercenaries, exiled leaders, and rebel forces, those who had already felt the Vaelik's wrath. Her charisma and conviction won over unlikely allies, and soon she commanded a ragtag force united against a common enemy. The weapon seemed to pulse with approval, growing stronger as her resolve solidified. Each encounter with the Vaelik was brutal. Their technology was terrifyingly advanced, their weapons capable of decimating entire fleets in moments. But Ryder's weapon adapted, unlocking abilities she hadn't even imagined. Energy shields that could deflect attacks, bursts of raw power that could disintegrate Vaelik soldiers. With each battle, the connection deepened, and Ryder felt the line between herself and the weapon blurring. Her allies fought bravely, but they began to see the toll the weapon took on her. Ryder's eyes held a faraway look, her voice tinged with the echoes of alien memories. She could sense the Vaelik's plans, feel their hunger for conquest, as though the weapon was channeling their intentions straight into her mind. The galaxy held its breath as the Vaelik fleet descended upon the frontier planet of Alos, a once peaceful world now transformed into a battlefield. Ryder stood on the command deck of the makeshift headquarters, surrounded by her motley crew of allies, mercenaries, rebel fighters, and a few loyal Terran cadets who had defected to join her cause. The tension in the air was palpable, a thick fog of anxiety mixed with determination. As the first waves of the Vaelik ships entered the atmosphere, their dark forms blotting out the sun, Ryder felt the weapon stir with anticipation. She could sense its hunger, a deep, resonant call that echoed through her very soul. The artifact had become more than just a tool. It was a part of her, and it craved the chaos of battle. "Ryder, we need to strategize," shouted Captain Draven, an exiled warlord who had become one of her most trusted allies. He paced the deck, his eyes darting over the holographic display of the incoming fleet. "If we don't hit them hard and fast, we won't have a chance." Ryder nodded, her mind racing. "We split our forces. The main attack will draw their attention, while a small team will flank their rear. I'll take the lead with the weapon. It's time to show them what we're capable of." The room erupted in murmurs, a mix of excitement and trepidation. They had all seen the weapon in action, felt its raw power as Ryder had decimated waves of Vaelik soldiers. Yet there was an unspoken fear of what the weapon might demand from her. She was aware of the toll it had taken on hers, of the alien memories that whispered in the back of her mind. As the plan took shape, Ryder felt a familiar surge of energy from the weapon, its presence wrapping around her like an embrace. It pulsed with warmth, almost reassuring her. "I am here," it seemed to say. "We are one." The battle began with a violent explosion as Ryder and her team launched their assault. The skies over Alos erupted into a kaleidoscope of color, ships bursting into flames, debris raining down like deadly confetti. The sound of battle echoed around her, a cacophony of war cries and the thundering boom of energy blasts. Ryder led the charge, her heart racing as she harnessed the weapon's power. She leaped into the fray, moving faster than she ever thought possible. With each swing of her arm, the weapon unleashed bolts of energy, disintegrating Vaelik's soldiers with a flick of her wrist. She was a whirlwind of destruction, carving through the enemy lines as though she were guided by an invisible hand. But as the fighting raged on, the weapon's grip on her tightened. Ryder felt the weight of its legacy pressing down on her. The memories of the Solum flooded her consciousness: battlefields, sacrifice, and the loss of entire worlds. Each use of the weapon brought flashes of their pain, their struggle against annihilation. She fought not only for her own survival, but for the memory of those who had wielded it before her. In the heart of the chaos, Ryder confronted the Vaelik overlord, a titanic figure that commanded respect and fear. It hovered above the battlefield, surrounded by a cadre of elite warriors. The moment their eyes met, Ryder felt a chill run down her spine. The overlord's gaze was filled with recognition, a cruel smirk twisting its alien features. "Wielder of the Solum," it boomed, its voice a low growl that reverberated in her bones. "You are but a shadow of what you once were. Surrender the weapon, and I may spare your life." Ryder felt a swell of anger surge through her. "You think I will give up my only chance to save this galaxy? You are mistaken." With a roar, she charged, the weapon igniting in a blinding flash. As she lunged, the weapon seemed to resonate with her fury, awakening its full potential. A radiant wave of energy burst forth, pushing back the Vaelik soldiers, parting the chaos like a sea. In that moment, Ryder was not just a cadet, but a force of nature. She could feel the weapon merging her very essence with its ancient power. It whispered of battles fought and victories claimed, of an eternal struggle that had spanned eons. As she released a wave of energy that tore through the enemy ranks, she felt the memories coalesce into a singular purpose: defeat the Vaelik. With every attack, she could sense the energy shifting, growing more chaotic. Her mind began to splinter, caught between her own identity and the echoes of the Solum warriors. The weapon demanded more of her, pushing her to unleash its ultimate power. As the tide of battle turned, Ryder saw her allies rallying behind her, drawing strength from her resolve. Together, they pressed forward, a united front against the dark tide. Yet Ryder knew this would not be enough. The weapon was building towards something monumental, something that could either save the galaxy or consume her entirely. In a final, desperate push, she faced the Overlord once more, their duel fierce and destructive. They exchanged blows, each strike resonating with the fate of worlds. The weapon flared to life, and Ryder felt the whispers of the Solum growing louder, urging her to tap into the weapon's core power. "Embrace your destiny," they seemed to chant. "Become the guardian we need." Summoning every ounce of her strength and resolve, Ryder unleashed the weapon's ultimate form. A brilliant light enveloped her, a cataclysmic explosion of energy that consumed the battlefield. The Vaelik overlord roared in defiance, but it was drowned out by the brilliance of the weapon's fury. The light washed over everything, erasing the darkness, consuming the enemy. The last thing Ryder saw before the blinding brightness enveloped her was the overlord's face twisting into an expression of pure rage before vanishing into nothingness. When the light faded, silence fell over Alos. The battlefield lay in ruins, smoke curling into the sky where the Vaelik fleet had once loomed. Ryder opened her eyes to a new world, a world saved from destruction. Yet the victory felt hollow. She stood alone in the wreckage, the weight of the weapon heavy upon her arm. The weapon had fused with her, not merely as a tool, but as a part of her very being. Memories of the Solum surged through her, their voices intertwining with her own. She was both a victor and a prisoner of their legacy. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Ryder surveyed the aftermath. Her allies were gathered, battered but alive. They had survived against insurmountable odds, but as they cheered her name, Ryder felt a deep sorrow creep into her heart. She would never truly belong to them again. The weapon had claimed her, binding her to its purpose as the galaxy's guardian. She had become a symbol of hope, but at what cost? Ryder knew she could never return to her life before Deathworld. The weight of responsibility loomed over her, and the voices of the Solemn would never let her forget it. With heavy steps, Ryder made her way to the edge of the battlefield, staring into the expanse of stars that stretched before her. The weapon pulsed gently, an almost comforting hum against her skin. "I will protect them," she whispered to the cosmos, "but I cannot stay." In the silence of the void, Ryder made her choice. She would become a wanderer among the stars, a sentinel forever watching over the galaxy. The Solum's legacy coursed through her, and she could feel their strength intertwining with her own. She had embraced the weapon's purpose, but at the expense of her humanity. With one last look at her allies, she stepped forward, allowing the weapon to guide her. She felt its power resonate, opening a path through the stars, a bridge between her and the ancient warriors who had come before her. As she drifted into the unknown, Ryder Thorne was no longer just a cadet. She had transformed into something greater, something eternal. The galaxy had a new protector, a guardian of peace bound to the legacy of the Solemn, forever standing watch against the darkness that lurked beyond the stars. And so she became both legend and myth, a warrior bound to an ancient purpose, a protector whose name would be whispered in awe, a solitary figure drifting through the cosmos, ever vigilant, ever alone.